G'day everyone, popping in for our usual Friday chat. Well, Friday here in Australia, it's Thursday probably in the rest of the world. Looking forward to having a great discussion with you guys today. So I'm going to crack a stubby with you all today. What have we got today? Is it Krombacher, is it? It's a German beer, I think. It says it's made in Germany, product of Germany, yeah, Alemang or something. So what is it showing there? I think it just says product of Germany, something there, and I'm not sure what that means, but I'm going to crack this with you all anyway, and we'll have a good chat. I'm going to pop over to the live chat in a minute to see who's here. Now, before we do pop over to the live chat, guys, just trying to make sure that you do say the @David Oastler if you want to get my attention. Let me just bring this up there. If you say @David Oastler, just make sure that I do see your comments, just so we know. So it's not a Corona day today. Chris, I'm actually having a Krombacher, or is it Krombacher? I don't know how you actually pronounce it, but I'll tell you what it's like in a second. Hang on. Not bad. I love trying different beers from everywhere. I really do like trying different things from all over the world. Whenever I travel, I always make sure I ask for the local beers. That's quite nice, actually. Not bad at all. So let's go over and see what's going on now. I'm going to, if you're coming in later, just skip to where you see the Oastler Images sign and it'll start from there. I will put a timeline down below as well, so if you don't want to watch all this pre-show stuff, you can skip it if you like. Apart from that, we're just going to have a chat before we get everyone on board, because it does take a while sometimes for everyone to see that I'm live. So if you are on here now, could you please give me a thumbs up too? That does make a difference, because then everyone knows I'm live. But let's see who's here. Excuse me. James Taylor said, do you think Canon and Nikon will have some lower prices on full-frame mirrorless cameras, because the Sony A7 III is an awesome budget camera? Want to know before I make my first full-frame purchase. James, I'll be waiting at this stage. Remember, what's the date today? It's only the 17th. So you've got less than a week to go. So I think the announcement was the 24th, which, just let me grab my calendar over. Where is the calendar? So according to that, we only have a week to go. Now that's Australia time, so it'll be a week and 1 day, because I suppose that'll be US time or whatever it will be. So there's only a week to go, James. So I wouldn't be doing anything at this stage until you see what the announcement is. Now remember too, Nikon may only announce it. They may not say prices on that date. So that's something we are going to have to wait and see what happens. We just don't know. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, because I did post a video yesterday or the day before, I think it was, about that. But I'll sort of elaborate it too again today for all the people live, and we can have a chat about that in the live thing. So I'll just wait. Casper just saying Sony, Sony, Sony. Rui said hello from Alabama. Fathom Rocker said, hey David. G'day Fathom Rocker. Chris said hello David from Corona Day in LA. It's not too cold here today. It's around about 17, so it's quite good. We're just about to hit spring here now, so it's starting to warm up a little bit. Although I believe we're going to have a cold weekend. Eden says, what's up? Reuben said it was only a matter of time before Sony took pole position. I'm going to talk about that too, Reuben. Fathom Rocker said, Irish Coffee Day. Interesting. Jose said, already liked the video. Good night from... Are you going to bed already, Jose? You can catch it tomorrow, though, when you get up. Ali's just saying, hi. Brendan's just give a thumbs up. Dominic said, hi, David. No beer for me, so I'll crack a Coke Zero with you guys. That sounds great, Dominic. Creative Film said, what's up everyone? Chad said, what's up David? G'day everyone, so good to see you all on board. Let me just get rid of this pre-show. So I've got a number of things I'm going to discuss with you today. We're going to start with just Sony's becoming #1 in that full-frame mirrorless. We're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to talk about the Canon mirrorless situation, some other things, awards that have been handed out to Sony, a stack of other things, and obviously then we're going to open it up to a chat as well. But before we start, just make sure, guys, if you haven't liked the Oastler images, well, it's not even Oastler images, it's for you guys. If you haven't liked the photography and videography school, please like it, because it's really growing now. We're up to nearly 2,000 subscribers. It's up to 1,919, so I'd love to get it up to 2,000 by the end of the day. That I'd just be wrapped. But just join us, because it's a fantastic page, and I've put this page for you guys to communicate to each other that follow me in YouTube. It's also a place where you can share your work in, you can share your YouTube videos, you can share any other videos that you create as well, share your business pages, your Instagram pages. I'd love you to share all of that on there. The only thing I don't allow is you to go live to it, which is just for me. But apart from that, it's open to whatever you want to post. It's a very positive group. If anyone basically starts slamming other members or being, too critical or whatever without being constructive, I'll just dump them out of the group. So I want it to be very positive. We have a weekly task. This week's task was colour. That's why that cake was chosen, because she put on a beautiful colour of cake there. This week's task is actually going to be long exposure. You can see if I click in here that there's stacks now of people that are submitting their long exposure images for this week's task. And I choose a weekly winner, and then we actually put that as the header for the group, so there's something in it for everyone, and it does give a weekly photography task that you can sort of go to as well. I mean, the stacks, you can see people are submitting work all over the place. The other thing too is it's a great place where people are sharing their work. They're basically asking for criticism, things like that. Some people are sharing their videography in here as well. Like you can see here, William has shared a video. The stack's sharing videos as well, because I'm encouraging this to be video and stills. I'd love a few more videographers on board as well, guys. If you can join us for that, for the videography, I'd love you to join that as well. But you can see it's a great page. It's fantastic. We're getting some beautiful work in here now. So please join us there. And like I've said, it's for you, so we can all communicate through that side as well when I'm not on YouTube. So that's all for that. All right, so let's get started today. I'm going to just bring up the logo and then we'll start on today's show, guys. So bear with me just for a second. So g'day everyone for our weekly live show. These are mostly related to Sony though, I must say. The live show on this day is basically for Sony and Sony rumours and things like that. Occasionally I will bring up other stories, like today I'm going to talk about the Canon and Nikon mirrorless discussion in there as well. But these chats are mostly for Sony, so just be aware of that if you actually are watching this. And we have other things, like I do post other stuff during the week. Like I think I just posted yesterday or the day before an interesting discussion on Sony and Nikon and Canon mirrorless, and if Sony's got an answer to it, which has gone nuts in the comments. It's been really funny reading some of the comments, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But apart from that, yeah, we just go through all the rumours and stuff like that. It sort of just goes through stuff that's been released and I give my spin on it, and we also then come to questions at the end where you guys sort of chime in. So we do basically have a discussion about news that's already out there, but I like to bring it up live and I can answer questions and stuff like that. At the end of it, we'll have a open question and answer where you can ask anything. And if you do look over here, you can see there that someone's put @David Oastler. That's the best way to get my attention, because it does, I can easily see it. So if you do want to make sure I don't miss it, just put that on, and then I shouldn't miss it if that's actually there. So we're going to have a great discussion, hopefully. I'll just scroll back and then I'll go through that a little bit later. So let's get started on to today's news, because I have got a bit to actually get through. By the way, if you've just joined, I have cracked a stubby with you guys today. It's a Krombacher, is it? German beer, so cheers, guys. I'm so tempted to add a bit of merch to this channel and have a t-shirt that says Crack a Stubby. I'd love to do that with you guys. You never know, it might happen. Anyway, let's get started for the day anyway, because I can't wait to take you through some of this stuff, and then we'll have some questions afterwards. So first story is that basically, there's big savings on... I've got to come back here, actually. This is the first story. Sony claims the #1 spot in the full-frame interchangeable mirrorless cameras. And I do believe that this is only US. I think it's pretty well only the US, I think they're saying. But I saw an interesting article this morning. Matt Granger actually said on Facebook that he put this as a link on Facebook to actually show this. But then he sort of bagged it a little bit. And I thought that was a bit strange that he would do that. I know that perhaps that's because he comes from the Nikon side. I'm not sure. But he basically said, that they're saying they're #1. But then he said... in the next breath that, yes, but, listen, Sony, make sure you give the facts that it's only #1 in this one market. I think it was the US, and it's not elsewhere. Digital SLR sales are outnumbering it. But you can't deny the fact that Sony now have become #1 full-frame mirrorless, full-frame cameras in the US. Now, no matter how you spin that, it is a good thing, and Sony have done a great job here. If you're looking at the numbers itself, there was a diagram here that shows, if you look at this area here, this is the growth for all other brands except Sony in full-frame interchangeable lens cameras. You can see it's 3%, and it was 67% between 2016 2017. And then in 2018, they've actually grown 78%. So it's really interesting. So they are growing substantially in that full-frame mirrorless marketplace. Now, whether it changes now that Nikon and Canon are obviously going to announce their full frame. I don't think we're going to see Canons this year, though, but Nikon probably. But we will discuss this a little bit later. But I just wanted to say and basically congratulate Sony, because I think it's an amazing feat. Yes, they are the only full-frame mirrorless camera, but they have now the most growth, the most sales in dollars, in the US for full-frame cameras. That's not just mirrorless, it's interchangeable full-frame cameras. So I think that's a really amazing thing, and I think Sony should be congratulated for that. And no matter what happens in the future now, Sony have now grabbed a big chunk of that market, so they have been successful. And I do think the A7 III has been responsible for that. Because remember, as I discussed earlier with you guys, that the A7 III is by far the best full frame out there for the money that it costs. There's nothing can go anywhere near that camera if you're talking about, the full frame coverage. It's got 4K video, everything internal, stabilization, a great EVF. It's not as good as the A9 or the A7R3, but it's still an amazing camera. And I think that really has been the thing that's changed the whole market. The price that Sony brought that in on was incredibly aggressive. I think they saw the writing on the wall with Nikon and Canon, and they've now made it very, very hard for Nikon and Canon to price their new mirrorless cameras. So it's going to be really interesting when we do actually find what they're going to be released at. I mean, at this stage, it's still all rumours and things like that. It's going to be fascinating to see what price range they do bring, particularly the Nikon in, because we're going to see that first. And basically what those cameras are going to have to compete. So it's going to be really interesting. Sony really changed the whole game when they released that camera at its price point. When you think it's like a mini A9 for the price that you're getting it at, it's outstanding. And now you're starting to see that in those numbers, that if you look at the numbers through here, you can see that the numbers are outstanding. They're amazing if you look at that. And now Sony are going to change a little bit of their marketing growth, because I noticed what they're actually going to do is they're now going to be holding like mini seminars and all these sort of things with their photographers that they've got on their brand, and doing all these sort of things to celebrate that full frame announcement. So I think it's looking really rosy for Sony, actually. I really do. Cheers, everyone. So let me know in the comments, because I will come back to that, what you think about that. It's a really interesting scenario, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when we get to going through that article that I put up the other day about does Sony have an answer to Nikon and Canon, because I'd really like to have a discussion with you guys about that, because there's a lot of negativity out there too, and I think it's a bit silly, but we'll talk about that all together and see what you guys think about that. But overall, what a great result for Sony. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's probably only going to get better. It's saying here, Sony celebrates #1 overall position in the US full-frame mirrorless cameras with the launch of a historic B Alpha campaign. And that's what I was saying about that campaign that they're going to launch. They're going to have a number of celebrations coming up very soon in the US about that. So, you know, it's, like I said, it's very, very exciting. I think too, you're probably going to find Sony are going to start becoming a little bit more progressive, because I think they're going to have to be now that other makers are coming into this full frame market. And I think you're going to see that now in the coming weeks. Clearly, with Nikon going to announce in a week's time what they've got, then we're going to know exactly where their specs are and everything on this camera, probably what it costs. And then Sony then will probably just wait until Canon release theirs, and then they'll have an announcement on that. But we'll talk about that very, very shortly. So that's the number one story that I wanted to talk to you about. The second story is quite interesting because, again, excuse me, I've still got this bit of a cough. I can't get rid of it. Sony are going to, these are SR3 to SR5s. They're talking about new E-mount lenses that are going to be coming out soon. And I noticed through here that they're saying, obviously there's going to be the Sony 24 1.4 FE. They're saying that's probably going to be announced in Photokina, so that's not far off. The Zeiss Batis 40mm f2. They're also saying a Sigma 70-200. What do you guys feel about a Sigma 70-200? I'm really hoping that they announce a Tamron 70-200. I'm definitely going to be getting the 28-75 eventually when it's in the shops. And I would love to get, say, even though I love my Sony 70-200 f4, I would love to have a 2.8 version that's light. The reason why I haven't got the G Master is it's too heavy for me, and I just don't want to lug around that weight. And that would be the problem, I suppose, with the Sigma would be similar. But if Tamron, say, brought out a 70-200 that was light like what their 28-75 is, that would be unbelievable. And then if you can get also their wide angles that they're talking about, that could be a great combination. You know, if you could get them all at 2.8 and be very light, fantastic. So I really hope that we do see Tamron release something like that. Let me know whether you'd be interested in that, guys, because I'd be curious. But they're saying that Sigma is going to, it's an SR4, so it's looking probable, and I think it will be probable with their other lenses that they've got out there. The 70-200 2.8. Also an SR3 is a 200-600 G-mount lens for FE. And again, they're going to be adding lenses for the A9 range, for that sports range or wildlife birding, that type of thing. So they've got to increase those. A 500 and 600mm f4 GM, so that's another thing. Obviously, they're going to be more expensive, but they're going to have GM lines of 500 to 600. An interesting lens we still keep hearing about, this is SR4, is saying down here, let me just bring this down a little bit for you guys. A 135 GM, and they're saying they believe it should be a 1.8. And I think they would have to do that lens at a 1.8. They really do have to compete with Sigma on that lens. Sigma is 1.8, so I think they definitely have to compete with the with that. And also they have to, like the Batis is f2.8, and I don't think that was enough for that lens. That was the problem. I think they kept the weight down. But if I was going to get a 135 lens, I would want at least a 1.8. 1.4 would probably be too big, but I've got a feeling it will be a 1.8. They may do a 1.4 to compete with the 105, and that could be an interesting scenario as well to see which way that they go. But what do you guys think about? Would you be interested in the 135 GM, or do you think you'd just go for, say, the Sigma 135, the native version of that now? Also, Samyang, one more Samyang AF lens will be announced this year. Let me know what you think that will be. I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting to see. And Tokina, also they're saying down here that they will have a new super wide FE lens and a new FE zoom to be announced between Photokina and early 2019. And they're also saying down the end there that Sigma should announce a new APS-C lens, so APS-C is not dead, the Sigma 50 1.4. That'd be quite a nice lens actually on APS-C. So they're really interesting. And again, like I've discussed with you before, we're getting more and more lenses now in this marketplace. This is where Nikon potentially will struggle because from what I've heard, they're only going to release that 0.95 lens later on down the track. We haven't heard yet when they're going to actually announce that lens. So they're only releasing the F4 version of the lens, I think, in the beginning, but we'll look at that in a minute. But yeah, let me know what you think about that anyway. Like I said to now, really, Sony have got, if you're like me, Sony have got ample number of lenses now. There's no issue now shooting Sony at all. And I'm talking about native lenses with Tamron, with Sigma, with Sony. And you can also use all of the other lenses like Canon and everything else for stills, not for video though, because you just don't get the tracking. But if you're dealing with photography, particularly, it's unbelievable. If you're dealing with videography, it's still unbelievable, but you have to use native glass or native lenses due to get that tracking issue if you're dealing with using adapters. But like I said to you just a couple of minutes ago now, there's no excuse. You can't use lenses as an excuse anymore. The only area where they're missing is the long end, which I just showed you. They look like they're addressing with this 200 to 600 FE. They're also saying that they're going to have in there the 500 and 600 F4 lenses. So it's just a matter of time before those lenses come out. And I probably think by the time that they release these two, by the time they released, say, the 200 to 600 or this 500 to 600 F4, the A9 II would probably be out, or an A9R. And that's probably looking at the next Olympics or something like that. So, you know, it's definitely going to happen. We're definitely getting more of these long lenses. So shortly you're not going to be able to say there's no lenses anymore. We don't know yet what Canon are going to announce. Whether Canon are going to just use their normal mount on their lenses, they may. We still don't know there, and we still don't know with the Nikon side of it how they will work with the adapted lenses. I'm yet to see anything that's adapted work as native lenses will work. We've got to see though. Sony may do something amazing there, but we have to wait and see. And if they don't work native though, and they don't work as fast as the native glass, it's going to take Nikon quite a fair amount of time to catch up now to what Sony have in their offering. So it's switched, which is really interesting. You know, we went from having no lenses where all the Nikon and Canon fanboys were criticizing Sony, saying they don't have any lenses. Well, it might be the other way now. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Cheers. All right, so let's go to the next story. I wanted to go through this serious, like I said, Sony has a serious answer to Canon and Nikon's new full-frame mirrorless mount. I had a big discussion about this the other day, and what they're basically saying now is the Nikon announcement is going to be two cameras, a Z6 and a Z7. The Z6 is going to be the 24 megapixel camera, and the Z7 is going to be basically the D850 sensor with the same number of megapixels. That's what we believe it's going to be. Also, the thing too, they're saying that there will be an impressive 58mm 0.95 lens, but it's going to be announced later on. And Canon is also rumoured to announce their full-frame mirrorless on September the 4th and the 5th. So what you've got here is you've got Nikon going to announce their mirrorless camera on the 24th. Then you've got 2 weeks later, I think it is, you've then got Canon are going to announce theirs on the 4th and the 5th. This is why I put that video out the other day. I think that this is what Sony are waiting on before they announce their next cameras. I watched Danny and Jason the other day, and they were saying that they thought that the A6 700 would come out first. I disagree with that. I don't think the A6 700 is going to compete with the full-frame camera that Nikon or Canon are going to announce. I think Sony have to announce a full-frame first to combat that camera. And I also believe that videographers particularly are still waiting for that A7S III. Now, if Sony do something really interesting with that camera, now just say, for instance, that they're going to do some voodoo with the camera itself, that they're going to, say, have the A9 sensor in that, or something like similar like the A9 sensor on there, and you're getting, say, around about 24 megapixels, just imagine what you'll be able to do with that camera for stills as well. And I think a lot of people are saying that the A7S may just be for video. And I'm not certain that that could be the case. Sony may do something really interesting here and do an unbelievable fusion camera. And I'm talking about the ultimate high-end fusion type camera that you could get, say, 18 to 24 megapixels in stills, which is easily enough. And then you're going to have this unbelievable low light sensor. Plus you may get the A9 autofocus in that camera. And they may do some incredible things like add internal NDs on that, electronic NDs that they can add on that. And you never can discount that they won't do a fully articulating screen. But these are all things that I'm saying, and I've just thought about this the other day when I was thinking about it, thinking that they're holding back for a reason, I believe. Naturally, they're holding back for this new EVF, that's this 5.6 million dot EVF, which trust me, will be a game changer if you're dealing with manual focusing. If you watch Max Ura's video when he talked about that, he does manual focusing all the time, and he wasn't keen on the A7 III LCD. The A9 and the A7R III LCD is way above what you're going to do in your A7 III. Yes, you can still focus, but if you're trying to nail critical focus, the crisper the LCD is, the better that is. If you're trying to say, do video and you're trying to do macro or something like that, it does make a difference if you've got perfect sharp screens. That's why if you're using a screen, an external monitor, it's so much easier to gain focus. Remember, you can't really trust your focus peaking on these cameras. They're not accurate. You can use it as a guide, but they're not really accurate enough. And I tend to not use them. I tend to just turn that off and use it by getting a nice crisp look through the viewfinder or the LCD. Now, if you're dealing with something that has 2 times the resolution that you have in the current A9 or the current A7R III, imagine what that LCD is going to look like. You're talking about a generational improvement. And I don't think you should say really underscore what that will give you. I think it's going to be amazing. So I'm just wondering whether they are going to hit this totally out of the ballpark and surprise everyone by putting, say, something similar to the A9 sensor in there, the similar focusing of the A9, and have something like the unbelievable low light, which you can guarantee is going to be there. You don't know what they're going to do, and I think they're holding back now to see what Nikon and Canon announce. Once that's been announced, I've got a feeling, and I do now believe this is going to be true, they're going to announce something incredible that's just going to blow us out of the water with the A7S III. And then I think after that's actually happened, they're going to probably then announce the A6-700. They could announce both at the same time, but I definitely think that the A7S III is going to be the main one that they're going to try and pump out to combat these full-frame cameras. I don't think putting out an APS-C camera is enough to counteract. People still want full frame, and this is what I'm trying to say to you. People will still want to go for full frame, and if Nikon do an amazing job, Sony are going to have to answer that with a camera that can compete against that. The A7 III probably will still, but the A9 is probably going to be, a full step above that, and that could be really exciting, and I can't wait to see what people say about that or what Sony have to say about that. It's really interesting, though, in the comments, how many people are sort of, getting more or less quite nasty, saying, things like they hope it fails and all this sort of stuff. I honestly don't want Nikon or Canon to fail. I hope these announcements are amazing because we all win. And I can't understand why people don't see that side of it, that, competition, you don't need that sort of hate against each other. Remember, they're only a camera, they're only a tool to get the image you like. And the better these tools are, the more competition that's out there, the more that Sony will be forced to innovate. If Nikon and Canon just died tomorrow, we'd probably just have the cameras we've got now for the next 5 years. There'd be no reason for Sony to innovate. And we need that innovation to force Sony to give us better things. And like I've said to you before, there's no reason why they can't even give us extra features in firmware as well. Because I believe they can do that. They could probably add an awful lot to even current cameras with firmware. They can even probably improve drastically the new A7S III or the A6-700, whatever it's going to be. They could probably also improve that drastically through firmware if they wanted to as well. And I think they're just holding back to wait and see what happens. So once I finish these news stories, let's have a discussion about that, because I'd be really curious to know what you guys have to think about that. Cheers. So next story. So that's that one. So anyway, if you want to check out that video, go back to my last video I posted. We've got a massive discussion there on it. The chat has gone berserk. So check that out too, guys, because it's really interesting looking at some of the comments. Next one. I've noticed this is happening here too. There's a big, again, rebates and stuff with Sony cameras. And I think this is leading up to what's going to happen in the coming weeks with the Nikon and Canon announcements, and also what Sony is potentially going to offer. So there's big discounts starting to happen there, because I think they can see the writing on the wall that, you know, Sony are going to announce other things. So there's going to be massive competition. And this is why I said to you that all this stuff that's actually happening at the moment is so fantastic for us, because just wait to see what Sony give us. That we're going to get some amazing things in the coming weeks and months, I'm sure of it. And I can't wait to see what's out there. I wouldn't buy anything at the moment, though. I would hold off on anything at the moment, buying anything, because I would wait to see now what what Nikon and Canon announce in the coming weeks before you buy anything, unless you have a desperate need and you need it. Say, for instance, you're just about to start weddings or something and you need a camera now, well, then you could justify it. But if you're just thinking about upgrading, or you're just looking out for a camera now, I'd hold off for a few weeks just to see what happens. Because you might find a lot of things happen in prices. If the Nikon announcements or the Canon announcements are amazing, you then might find that puts pressure on the Sony gear, and they may drop prices there as well. And like I've said to you, it's a win-win scenario. The worst case scenario for us could be that Sony and Canon and Nikon blow these announcements completely and they're duds. That would be the worst thing ever for us Sony shooters, because then they might hold things back. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But I would definitely hold off at this stage. I've had a number of people contact me, say, should they buy an A6-500 at the moment or an A7 III or whatever? And I've said, no, just wait to see what happens. Just hold off just for a couple of weeks. It's not going to take long before we have more answers to what's going on. We're that close now that it might be worthwhile waiting before you buy anything else. But I did notice they were saying that there's all these discounts sort of going on, and there's a stack of them that are listed here. I'll put the links down to this below in case if anyone's interested, but there is heaps of discounts going everywhere off camera bodies. There's a number here in Australia as well, and I've also noticed that there's also stacks of things off, say, Panasonic. The GH5 I noticed had up to $500 Australian off this morning, depending on if you bought lenses or something with it. They're also perhaps trying to get ahead of what's going to be announced in the coming days. So it's really interesting what this competition is actually forcing. We're starting to see multiple camera brands discounting. Let me know too whether you've noticed that in the US and Europe, guys, because I'd be curious to know. But I've noticed I'm getting stacks of emails here in Australia about pricing being offered on Panasonics, Canons, Nikons. Like I said, Sony have got stacks being offered at the moment. And this is all competition that's coming about now. It's really interesting. It's a really interesting scenario. So that's that one. Next story, I thought this was quite amazing. If you're from the Ukraine, you can actually get the Sony A9 for free if you order the Sony 400mm. Now, I don't know what they're saying that's worth, though. Perhaps it's ridiculously priced over there, that the 400mm 2.8 lens. But to have, say, the Sony A9 thrown in is really interesting. They're not saying what it's worth over there, though. So if anyone knows, let me know. I'm just trying to see in the comments whether anyone was saying... Oh, let's have a look here. Does anyone want to buy this kit? I'm from the Ukraine right now, and I could help. A bit more detailed, it is a pre-order of the lens, so you can't actually get it now. You pay 50% now, and 50% when you're receiving the lens in their store, maybe. And they say that they'll give you an A9 with the lens for free. And the lens costs $13,500 United States dollars. It costs $12K in the US. Okay, so it is more expensive than in the US. Not what is it, $1,500 though. So you could easily buy the lens and the camera for $14 in your country. Is it saying it's a lie? Update, this is a lie. A9 costs more than the A7 III that I was talking about. Yeah, I'm not sure. The next one down saying the Sony A9 is on sale now for $4,099 US. If the lens costs $12,000, then the total cost for both is $16,000, not $4K. So it looks interesting. So it does look like, if you're reading those comments, that it is cheaper than buying both the camera and the lens separately. I don't know how many people are going to be buying those together, though. But it's interesting that that's been offered, and just in Ukraine, I wonder why. I don't know whether that's real or whether it's a scam or or what. So just be careful if you are thinking about buying that. Just make sure that it's not a scam, because it's quite interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Next story. This was really amazing again. Once again, I said how amazing Sony are doing at the moment. This Sony wins 6 of the 18 EISA awards. And it's interesting that the cameras that won and the lenses that won. The A7 III was the best camera of the year for 2018-2019. That does not surprise me one little bit. And I've said that to you before, that the A7 III is by far the best camera for its price that I've ever used. And that's why I laugh when Ken carries on about that, saying it's a dud camera and all that sort of stuff. I mean, honestly, mate, seriously. That is an amazing camera. It's still not my favourite. My favourite is still the A9, and there's a couple of reasons why that's still my favourite. I love the silent shutter. Yes, you can use the silent shutter on the A7 III, but it's nowhere near as reliable as the A9. I can use the A9 without really ever having to think about banding. I can't do that with the A7 III. There's also the chance that you will get rolling shutter with the A7 III. You won't get that with the A9. And I still believe that the focus is a fraction faster. Not much, though. It's a fraction faster on the A9. The EVF is a little bit better. And also the video, I believe, is a fraction crisper on the A9 than it is on the A7 III. But you haven't got the profiles like you've got with the A7 III. But you're talking about a camera that's $2,000 dearer. You know, I mean, there's a reason why the A9 is much dearer. I still can't get over, and this is the thing I keep telling people, that the A9 is a game-changing camera. That sensor that they have in that camera there's nothing like it anywhere. There's no other competition out there that has anything like that camera. That sensor is so far ahead of anything that's ever been produced. I just can't say enough about it. And until you've had one, you won't understand what I'm saying. But there's just something about it. You know, having the dials on the top, having the extra dials here is just amazing to do your focusing and to change, you know, fast shutter and slow frames, I mean. It's just beautiful. I mean, it really is beautiful. But you pay for that. If you're dealing with, say, a camera that's $2,000 US, like the A7 III is, it's no wonder that they gave this the best camera of the year. That's definitely that's my second favourite camera. I could easily, if I didn't have the money to have bought an A9, I would have bought 2 A7 IIIs. And what a fantastic combination. I'm just lucky that I've got the A9 and the A7 III that I can use both in weddings. But I could easily get by with just one A7 III. I love the video on both of these cameras. I shoot in the standard profile. I don't need the log. I'm just totally happy with the standard profile. And I just adore them. And the focusing's incredible. You can shoot 10 frames per second on this A7 III. It's got everything you need. I mean, it really is an outstanding camera for the price. And this is the thing that I don't know how Nikon and Canon are going to answer this at the same price range. If they're $1,000 above what that camera is, they're still going to struggle. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they combat that camera. So it's no wonder that camera got the best camera of the year. The A7R II got the best professional camera. A7R III, sorry, obviously for its resolution. So that got the best professional. So the A7 III got the best camera of the year, and the A7R III got the best professional camera of the year. The RX10 got the best super zoom camera for 2018-2019. The wide angle zoom, the 16 to 35 GM was the best wide angle lens. The 70 to 200 this is the 100 to 400. The 4.5 to 5.6 got the best tele zoom lens. And again, that's an amazing lens. And I think that was it. So they're all great bits of hardware. But again, if you're talking about camera bodies, they've voted the A7 III and the A7R III as their 2 best cameras. I mean, how amazing is that if you're shooting camera, Sony? It really is an outstanding time. And the A9 is not even in there. I mean, you think about the full three frame cameras that we have in Sony, the A9, the A7 III, and the A7R III. How lucky are we when we're shooting Sony, and we've got those 3 cameras with us? I mean, seriously, how lucky are we? It's just an outstanding time to be shooting. I think it just is amazing. So that's all we've got for news. So let's open it up to questions, because I'm dying to see what you guys have today as questions. Let me just scroll back up here. So fire away anything, guys, because it doesn't have to be related to anything I've been talking about. But basically, we're going to spend the next half an hour or so or whatever going through all of these. Everyone early on is just saying hi. Reuven said it was only a matter of time before Sony took pole position. The A7 III would have been a massive help to get there. Yeah, it would have been. And like I discussed, I think that was the camera that changed it all. Look, Sony were already getting ahead of the game with their other cameras, but the A7 III clearly was the one. That was such a clever marketing strategy by Sony to announce that camera at its price range with all the features. That's the first time where really they held nothing back at that price range. Apart from the EVF, which you can't blame them, they had to hold something back for that price range. But everything they've given us with that camera for that price was just, no one can compete with that. And like I said, I'm not sure how Nikon and Canon are going to compete with that at that price range. And if their new mirrorless, if their 24 megapixel camera is priced $1,000 dearer, they'll be in trouble. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Jose said he already liked the video. He was going to bed after that to watch it later. Ali's saying hi from Canada. What else have we got? Jamie said hello from the Gold Coast. I suppose that is. Chantel said, hi, I hope my new Sony phone is as good as your camera. So you got a Sony phone, did you, Chantel? I'm sure it will be. Jason said hello, everyone. George said hi from Egypt. Epic Skies said I joined. Oh, that's the photography videography school. Yeah, if you haven't joined that, guys, join the photography videography school. It's a great site for you guys. We're nearly up to 2,000 subscribers, so I really would love you to join us there. Hector said, what's up? Epic Skies said I was Serenity Photos. I changed my name to Epic Skies Photography. Okay. Jason said, where are we? Jason said, where were we? It's jumps. I hate the way it does that. Sometimes it just jumps and stacked down. Oh yeah, Jason said here, I'm happy to say my A7 III and 2470 G Master will be arriving tomorrow. Woohoo! Oh, that's lovely. What a great combination, Jason. You're going to love that. Let us know how it goes. Long Rider said Sony rules. I love his arm he's got there with the big muscle. Jason said bought the last one they had. Interesting. So they had that in store, Jason, did they? Well, that's great. Fathom Rocker said, very nice. I have that combination. I'm DeBrownson here. G'day, mate. How you going? Alex22 said not for long. I'm not sure what that means, Alex. You're talking about Sony on top, not for long. Sizzleman said hello from Southern California. What else? Richard's just saying hi. Alex22 said Canon will be the comeback kid. I hope, look, Alex, I really hope they do well. I honestly hope that Nikon and Canon both do well. I don't want this to be slamming. I'm not going to allow it in here, but I'm all for those companies doing well. I've got nothing against Nikon and I've got nothing against Canon. To me, they're all tools. I love Sony because that's what I use. But I certainly am not going to slam Nikon and I'm not going to slam Canon. I both hope they survive and I both hope they do well. The marketplace is big enough for all of us. Liam said hello from Sacramento. Creative Film said Nick Granger, Nikon fanboy. Yeah, but that was interesting what he said about that this morning, and I think it was a bit uncalled for. I don't think he needed to say, oh yes, but if you look at Japan or if you look over the world, that they're not number one. The statement from Sony and all these other comments that I was reading was said it's number one in the US. So why do you have to take that away from Sony? It is number one in the US. Now, it doesn't matter if next month it's not. At the moment, it is number one. So all you Nikon and Canon or whatever fanboys that want to come in and say it's only temporary or whatever, it doesn't matter. At the moment, Sony is number one. You have to get over it. It's like I said, it's not a competition in that respect. I'm just pointing out the facts, and they're the facts. But Matt carrying on about that, saying it wasn't true and all that sort of stuff was a bit ridiculous. Daniel said they are also the #1 seller in Australia. I believe that too, Daniel. Yep, I would definitely believe that here too. I don't have the figures to back it up, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. Delta Dave says, congrats, Sony, you won a one-horse race. Langston's just saying hello from Los Angeles. Epic Skies said the A7 III pricing wrecked the used marketplace. Yeah, it probably did too, actually. I don't worry about that, though. I mean, I never worry about how much depreciation or whatever my cameras get. You don't have to upgrade if you don't want to. The camera's as good as the day you bought it. I just wear the cost and just get another one. Alex22 said, everyone is a fanboy to the brand they like. Jim Penn says, greeting from Minnesota. Hector said, thumbs up. Yep, I'd love a thumbs up too, guys. If you could give me one, I really would appreciate that. It does make more people watch me. Epic Skies said, no, I started off with Canon, now I'm Sony. Not a fanboy, I jumped to Nikon if it's better. And remember, I was full on Nikon. I used all of their high-end gear, and I used that for 15 years. And I love those Nikon cameras, but I wanted something that was lighter that could shoot video and stills at the same time. I was getting a sore back, and it really hurt me. And Sony were the only camera really I could jump to that was full frame. I love Sony gear that they have now. I love their innovation. I love their support. Everyone keeps whinging about their support. I can only go by what I tell you from here. Their support in Australia is outstanding. Way better than what I had with Nikon. Way better than what I had with Nikon. And I'm sure it's like that now in the USA as well, and most of Europe, because they have Sony Pro support in most of those places now. But I'm not going to bag Canon, and I'm not going to bag Sony to say that they have terrible gear. I don't believe that they're anywhere near what Sony have at this stage, and I still don't believe they'll have it when these new ones are announced. It took Sony a number of years to get where they're up to, and it did take a long time, so I'll be very surprised if they are as good. Now, they may be, and I hope they are. And this is the interesting thing. This is the difference between the way that I think to the way that these radical fanboys think, that just want to shoot everyone down and shoot the opposition down. And you know, guys, get over it. It's a tool to take images with. It's not worth fighting over and being abusive and being nasty. It's just stupid. And like I said, if you're sensible, you want Nikon and Canon to survive if you're a Sony fanboy, because it will give you better things at Sony. And that's the way you've got to think. Anyway, rant over. Caleb said, I like the Sony. I like that Sony is not an old dinosaur at chasing the future in tech. And you're right. The thing that I love about Sony is it's innovative. There's things that Sony could improve, though, and I hope that this release that they're talking about now with Nikon and Canon makes Sony do that, because they have been holding some things back, like the touchscreen is crap if you're dealing with it compared to using a Sony phone, for instance. There's no reason why Sony couldn't give us that same interface that is on their phones. Now, come on, guys, you know that's true. There's no reason why they can't give us an amazing touch interface. They're just holding that back until they can give it to us later on. There's no reason why Sony can't give us better firmware updates like Fuji and like Panasonic do. There's no reason at all why they can't do that. And these are areas that I've been saying all along to Sony that you should be doing things. There's probably no reason why on the A9 they haven't given us the profiles, the video profiles. Again, they've held back. So don't think that Sony don't hold back, they do. And I'm hoping with all of this competition that comes out now that Sony are going to say, yes, we do have to work better for these guys. And this is the difference, that when you're listening to me as against someone that's paid by Sony, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not paid by anyone to say anything. So I'm going to say exactly the truth. And if I think Sony could lift their game, I'm going to tell you, because I'm not sponsored by Sony. And there are areas where I think Sony could improve drastically. They can improve their touchscreen, they can improve firmware, and they could give you extra things like, say, the profiles in the A9. They're things that they certainly could do now if they wanted to. And I'm hoping a bit of competition makes that happen. So what's Langston said, I honestly think Nikon and Canon are in a position of needing to answer. Sony has thrown down the gauntlet, and they have. The A7 III has changed everything. And that's why I think that they did that. They could see that Nikon and Canon, what they were going to do, and they basically have blown it all out of the water right from the start, because I'll be very surprised if Nikon and Canon's answer is as good as the A7 III. I will be really surprised if they're anywhere near what that camera is. But let's wait and see. They might do something. Langston said, but the question is, can they hold top spot? And, well, really, I don't think it matters, Langston, honestly. At the moment, Sony have done it. That's all that really matters at this stage, that they've got there. It's going to be interesting to see, yes, in the future what happens. But remember, there is an awful lot of people now that have moved over to Sony, an awful lot of people that have moved over. And if you're dealing with, like I said to you, if you were dealing with Nikon, that they're going to come out with two. We don't know yet whether Canon are going to announce one camera, whether they're going to announce two. But you're also dealing with Sony at the moment, have the A9. You don't know what's next for the A9 II. You don't know what's next for the A7R3 or A7R4, I mean. You've got no idea what they're going to bring out with the A6700, or no idea what they're going to bring out with the A7S III. So definitely don't count Sony out now. I think they're going to come out with all guns blaring, to be honest. I really do. And like I said, that's why I'm so excited about what's going to happen. And this is where competition is so great. Chris said, the technology and innovation in the past few years from Sony has really pushed them to the top. Congratulations to them. And I agree, you have to congratulate them. And that's why I thought that Matt criticising them like that was uncalled for. And I really don't think he should have done that. Daniel said, pricing is interesting. The body is incredible value, but the lens prices are quite high, and that counteracts the value quite a bit. Well, yes, they are a little bit, they are more expensive, Daniel, I agree with you, but remember, you don't have to buy the Sony lenses. You can get the Sigma, you can get the Tamron, and I do believe that with competition, Sony are going to have to change their pricing structure for their lenses. If Nikon and Canon do really well and they start selling big numbers of these cameras, Sony are going to have to counter it. And one of the first things I think that you'll see, well, obviously will be a new body, but I believe lenses will be next. I think Sony pricing is going to have to be adjusted anyway, because I believe with Tamron, with the Sigma and all these other lenses coming on board, there's going to be downward pressure put onto the lenses anyway. So I think Sony lenses are going to have to adjust in pricing. Creative Films said, don't count on Nikon beating Sony. I wouldn't count on it yet either. It's going to be interesting to see. Jamie said the Sigma 70-200 would be interesting, but I prefer the Tamron, especially if it follows the 28-75 has done, minus the initial focus issues. Yeah. And I think they've probably learned from that too, Jamie. I think Tamron won't make that mistake with their next lens that's been brought out. They have fixed it though. You have to give Tamron credit that they said they were going to fix that focus issue, and they did. I was lucky the lens I had never had it, and everyone was accusing me of lying, and it's funny because I've now been proven right. But I think a 70-200 would follow that same formula. They would have learned from that now, and I think that probably will be okay right from the get-go. I'm also very excited about it too, and I think it's only a matter of time before they announce that. I think the Sigma 70-200, if it's released, would be horrific in weight and size. But, let's see what happens. But either way, we're still winning because we have more lenses that we can put on there. Michael, g'day, Michael. Good to see you in here. Epic Sky says, I'm not counting on beating Sony. I'm counting on Sony beating them. However, if Nikon beats Sony body, I'll switch. And you may find a lot. Will I switch? No, look, I'm not going to switch, guys. If Nikon do announce an amazing camera, or if Canon announced an amazing camera, it might be that I have one. I might buy one to use it and try it and things like that. But I'm pretty heavily invested in Sony now. There's no way known I'm just going to switch over for the sake of one camera. Because remember, you can bet your bottom dollar that Sony are going to announce something incredible straight after it. So just don't, the second Nikon announced an amazing camera, if that's what it is, don't immediately just sell all your Sony gear. Yeah, that'd be silly to do that. Wait and see what Sony have as an answer to that before you did do that, if you're thinking about just switching. There's no way known I'll be just switching like that, and I probably won't ever switch again fully like I have now. But it doesn't mean that I won't use those cameras. If they brought out an amazing camera, it might be that I use them. If Canon brought out an amazing vlogging camera that was mirrorless, that was full frame or something like that, that had a fully articulating screen, it might be that I get it. So my options are always open. Remember, they're a tool. There's no reason I would switch, though, completely over. What else have we got? Ray said, I really want to see what Takina comes up with. Yeah, that will be interesting as well. Epic Sky says, don't care about the video specs, just high resolution the most. The A7S III will have is 18 megapixels. There's nothing wrong with 18 though. You know what? I used to shoot weddings with 12 when I had the D3S. And 12 megapixels, I used to shoot big posters on that. Don't underestimate what you could do with 18 megapixels. If I had an 18 megapixel A7S III, I would use that for weddings. And it was amazing at focus and things like that. I would use that in a heartbeat. I'm De Brown said, I noticed you are more interested in non-Sony branded lenses. In the past, you weren't very interested in with non-Sony branded lenses because of no pro support. What changed? That did change, Tony. I have got more interested originally when I'll explain why. Because I've already got all the lenses that I need in case if something failed, and I need backups of everything that I have. Now, initially, when I was still buying a whole range of lenses to say, do weddings and portraits, I was trying to build enough of a lens profile to get me through weddings that Sony Pro support would match if I had an issue that they could lend me another lens straight away. So if I did have other lenses, and there's another reason why I've changed as well, because I've got more into fusion. Initially, I was doing way more stills. Probably 90% of my work was stills. Now it's probably 60% stills and 40% video. So my shooting has changed a lot as I've moved over more to fusion. And the fusion side of it has made me more interested in getting third-party lenses like that Tamron, for instance. Because I've always got now my Sony lenses that I can send off to pro support. I'm not selling my Sony lenses that I've got. So when I'm doing weddings and stuff like that, if a lens failed, I've still got the ability to send that stuff off to Sony Pro support because I'm still going to be shooting the primes. It's just I can probably no longer avoid or say just ignore those lenses because the prices are so incredibly good. And when I used that the 28 to 75, Tony, it changed my thinking in how light that lens was and how well it worked. And to be honest, if I could buy two of those lenses probably three of those lenses for the price that I could buy the G Master lens, that doesn't matter so much anymore that if you had an issue like I would have had if it was a G Master. If I had a G Master lens and I lost that lens or something like that and then I've got to buy a new one, it was an awful lot of money. But if I lost, say, the Tamron, the 28 to 75, it's not so terrible if you had to replace that lens. So I have changed my thinking a little bit, but I've only changed that thinking because I've now got a full lineup of lenses that are native Sony that I can now send off. I've got the full range there and they're not going to be sold. So when I'm saying that I'm now interested in non-Sony branded lenses, it's only to add to what I've got. It's not going to change my Sony lenses, if that makes sense, Tony. Heldon said, my Sony A7 III and Sigma 35 1.4 are amazing. Probably wouldn't have bought the camera if I hadn't discovered this channel, David. Oh, thanks so much, Heldon. I'm glad you're really happy with it. And thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. Jamie said, nothing wrong with 18 megapixel though. 18 megapixel would be a great bump for stills on the A7S. Yep, it would be. If they can give us 18 megapixel and get better low light with the A9 autofocus, can you imagine what that camera is going to give us? And this is why I'm really interested in it, and I really do hope they give us more of a fusion camera with that rather than just video. I know the videographers are going to say in here that they want it just for video, but I want a fusion camera. I want something I can use and that will be amazing for stills and video. What else have we got? Epic Sky said, I have the A7 III and happy with it, but if Nikon has great video with, let's say, 50 megapixels, I'm game. Yeah, I just don't think you need 50 megapixels, though. You don't need that for video, Epic Skies. You're talking about, well, if you shoot stills, it'd be fine. I still believe that the 24 megapixel is a sweet spot. And this is why I haven't upgraded to the A7R III. I've still got the A7R II, and I'm going to keep that for the time being. I'm totally comfortable with shooting 24. It gives me basically everything that I need, and it's more than enough for what I shoot. Unless you're shooting landscapes and you're going to put these things up massive, unless you're shooting high-end skin, like in studio, you don't need high megapixel cameras. Or you're cropping in. I tend to not crop much. I tend to try and shoot correctly in camera without cropping. So for me, it's not an issue. And 24 megapixel for me is the sweet spot. I don't have so much trouble with storing it. I don't have so much trouble in editing that footage. They're all things why I think 24 is the sweet spot. It's definitely a sweet spot for me, but others who shoot differently will love the A7 III or might love 50 megapixel cameras. Caleb said, Sony already has created great FM at a great price point. I don't see Nikon being able to compete at the same price range. I don't know if they will be able to either, and that's going to be the interesting thing. Trevor said, I'm curious, if you were just starting out again and didn't have any gear, would you buy the same cameras given all the new developments in the mirrorless space? At the moment, Trevor, yes, I still would. I would still recommend at the moment. This is why I'm saying you would wait for the next couple of weeks. I mean, seriously, if you're waiting, if you're just about to buy now, I would hold off. But at the moment, if anyone was just coming into this industry and was starting out from scratch, the A7 III is the camera I would tell them to buy. No doubt about it. And also, if they were just starting out, I would tell them to get the A7 III and the Tamron 28-75. That's the combo that I would tell people to get. Now, immediately, that gives you a combination that you could shoot almost anything. Now, you can't go and shoot sport that, where you need a 200mm lens or 400mm lens, but you could do a wedding with that camera. You could do events with that camera. It goes up to 75, so you could do portraits. Remember, it's got almost macro in that, so you could shoot macro as well, or almost macro. You could also do great video, and you could also shoot that on a gimbal. So, because it's so light. So that would be the combination I'd be telling someone who are just coming into the industry to get that as their starting out combo, the A7 III and the 28-75. So yes, I still would tell people to come the way I've gone. I still think Sony is the way to go. I might change my mind in 2 weeks though. If Nikon do something amazing, I might have a different opinion. Fathom Rocker said, Nikon needs to nail video autofocus for them to join any traction with new users. Yeah, they do. And that's the thing that they haven't answered yet, isn't it? They haven't shown yet how it works with video tracking. And that's going to be the thing that we're waiting to see. Creative Film said, Sony will always be ahead. 42 megapixels is plenty. The A7R III is my workhorse for video photography. Epic Sky said mine too, but Nikon is better, in my opinion, for the game. I think he's saying that he prefers Nikon. Epic Sky said he's not afraid to jump ship, so I think a lot of people aren't actually. Trevor said a 58 0.95 lens from Nikon will cost an absolute fortune. Yes, it probably will. The camera and lens together will be 7K. Huge mistake. Well, we don't know that yet. We're going to have to wait and see, aren't we, how much they charge the Nikon camera when it's released. We're still all guessing at this stage what a Nikon is going to announce. I wouldn't be surprised if it's $1,000 dearer than the A7 III though. I hope it's not for Nikon's sake. I really do hope that they're pricing that comparable to the A7 III, because there's no way, if they're $1,000 up from what the A7 III is, well, we have to see also what specifications that camera has and how it works, but if they're not matching that camera, if they don't beat that camera and they're $1,000 dearer, Nikon are in trouble. So we have to wait and see. What else have we got? Creative Film said you will lose too much money playing the Switch game. Yeah, you will. You've got to have a reason to switch. You don't switch for no reason. I only switched from Nikon to Canon because I had a need to do it. I wanted to do Fusion, which was video and stills, and work full frame. There was no camera at that time that had the ability to do that. And there still isn't at this stage. Sony is still the only manufacturer now that has cameras available at this stage. It might change in a couple of weeks. We have to wait and see. But you've got to have a reason to change. Just because I certainly would not change to Nikon if the Nikon was slightly better. than what Sony have now. Because remember, they haven't released their new cameras yet. We've got to wait to see what Sony announced yet. So I'd definitely be waiting to see what Sony released before you even thought about that switching. What else have we got? Jim said, I predict Sony will release a talking lens and a camera with a PDA with a smart-ass voice. Wouldn't that be interesting? Jim Penn said, imagine the possibilities. I know, imagine it. It would be incredible. I've always wondered why, and I just can't understand why this has not happened. Why haven't they put, like Sony, for instance, why have they not just added one of their phones onto the back of the camera and then use that interface to power the camera? I don't know why it's not possible. It should be easily possible. Sony do amazing phones. I have the iPhone, but why don't they do that? And you use, like, you know, just imagine if you were dealing with, like, your phone, you know, like when you're dealing with the type of interface that you're dealing with here, if that was connected to the camera, and then you use the software like what you're using on there, like Camera Plus or whatever, and you can manipulate the camera through the touch software. There's no reason why Sony couldn't do that now. And I don't understand why no one's ever done it. I really don't understand why no one's done that. I really don't know why. What else? Caleb said, I would rather have cheaper and lighter lenses. Well, I've sort of gone that way now too, Caleb, but I do definitely like lighter lenses. It's not so much the cheaper, but it's more I like to work light, and that's why I love that Tamron so much. And it's also the reason too why I use primes all the time, because they generally are lighter than using a big zoom lens. Jim said, seriously, I think Sony will develop technology to read the sensor faster. I think you're probably right, Jim. Langston said, the comments are just fanboyism. Anyone with a brain knows we don't want Sony to have no competition. And that's exactly right, Langston. That would be the worst thing that we could ever get. And that's why I often don't understand Ken's sort of thinking, you know, the way that he definitely has agenda against Sony, you know, but I just don't understand why he puts Sony down so much. I really don't. Trevor said, given that Sony is making Nikon sensors, they probably have already made accommodations for how to counter what they release. Interesting. Fathom Rocker said, I want Nikon and Ken to keep Sony on their toes. Langston said, I was wondering about that. It seems that they have actually developed a secret camera because they don't make everything in-house. Are you talking about Nikon or Sony, Langston? Dominic said, I want them all to compete at top level. The more they do, the more we win. Exactly. And that was the exact point that I said. Competition will force Sony to do better things, and that's what we all want. Caleb said, reader. Oh, okay. Scissorman said, A7 VA is $898. I noticed that. They've dropped the A7, the RX100 VA down $100. But do you know what? Like, after using this in that video that I posted 2 videos back, I think it was 2 or 3 videos back, I'm so glad that I got the Mark V, this version, because of the Play Memories apps on there. Because this, I could do the time-lapse. When you're looking at the time-lapse in that video, it was all done through this. You can't do that with the version A. I still believe the version 5, if you don't need that extra long zoom, which I can understand some people would want it, this is still the best one to get. But I did notice that the RX100V, yes, is $100 cheaper at the moment. So whether they're not selling that camera, there's got to be a reason why they would have dropped that so soon afterwards. It's interesting because it was $988 or whatever it was. Caleb said mirrorless is much more intuitive to use. Jim Penn said, oh, that's something else. Creative Film said Sony doesn't hold back, and that's the main thing that I love about Sony so far, is they really haven't held back, apart from that touch screen and a few things that they could do with firmware. Like the A7 III, for instance, they held nothing back. The A9, what they brought out with that is incredible. So you're right, they don't really hold back. What else have we got? Creative Film said $300 off the GH5 at the moment. Yep. I think the GH5, they can see the writing on the wall, I believe, that they're trying to get some cameras sold before all these new mirrorless come out. Because there's big savings on that. Like I said, it was 500 Australian, depending on, you could get a GH5 and lenses, and you could save $500. That's a lot of money. So it's interesting. Do you think Sony will deliver a budget A9 or put the AF and processing speed of the A9 into a crop body? I think there's a need. They may in the A6700. They might give us that in the A6700. I don't think it will be as good as what the A9 is, but they may give us a sort of a bit of a dumbed down version of that. But I'm not sure what we'll get on the A6700 when they deliver that. I think we'll probably get 4K 60p on it though, but it might be limited to that 5 minutes or something like that. They have to remember they've got to give you a difference of wanting to move up to the A7 III. If the prices aren't very far apart, people would just jump up to the A7 III. So if they want people to buy the A6700, they've got to give us features in that would make you stick with APS-C, and that might be that fully articulating screen. It's going to be interesting to see what they offer there. We've got to wait and see. Jamie said Sony weather sealing is non-existent. Jamie, that's not true. I use the stuff outside all the time. Don't believe that the Sony weather sealing is as bad as it seems. That video that was posted where they were throwing hoses over them was crap. No one would ever use their cameras in those sort of conditions. I've used it in rain, I've used it in downpours, I've used it under waterfalls, and I've never had an issue with any of my Sony cameras. So I don't believe that's true, Jamie. I think that's more fanboyism. Sony gives you cramps in about 30 minutes of holding that thing. I don't believe that either, Jamie. You're starting to sound like a fanboy. What else have we got? I hate the way that jumps. Yeah, it's awful. It just jumps right down. Oh, here we go. What else have we got? Ron said, I've been having trouble focusing a group of, say, 5 people in the A7 III. I was shooting at f11 to make sure it was was on focus. What camera? Because the f11 may be too much. I tend to use, I never go to f11. I'll use about f8 and focus manually. Not focus manually, I'll put it on, I usually use AFS, and I'll put the focus into the center of the group. Now, if you're using f8, that will be more than enough for a really large group. So I usually use f8. I put the center focus using AFS into the middle of the group, and then you'll have enough depth of field either side, and that's the way that I tend to have. And I wouldn't use eye autofocus. You turn face detect and eye autofocus off. That's the way I do it with group photos. Jim said, how can all the Sony haters explain away the 5 awards at Sony? Exactly, Jim. But they always will find something. Yeah, I think Jamie, just ignore Jamie's comments because he's just obviously a troll. He's just bloody slamming it, so let's ignore him. Sony Northup said, Sony is destroying the competition. Canon and Fuji need to repent. What else have we got? Hello from Charlotte. Sony cameras are rocking the imaging world right now, beating everyone. Joanne said, after watching your video and a lot more, I just bought the Tamron 28-75 as my first lens for E-mount, and like I said, that's a great combination, mate. 70-200 for me, but might go for the Sigma 135 f1.8. Yeah, that'd be a great combination, fantastic combination. I would like to see the A9S with a fully articulating screen. I don't think we're going to see that, though, not with a fully articulating screen. I'd love to see it too, but I don't reckon we're going to get it. Jim said, I used the Sony 55 1.8, 70-200 2.8 GM, and the 85 1.4 GM. The 85mm seems to be the slowest to focus compared to the other two. You can't compare anything, Jim, to the 55. The 55 is nuts. How long have we been on? 1 minute 30. The 55 is completely insane. Don't compare anything to that. Particularly, the 85 is going to be slower. Remember, you're moving around a massive piece of glass. It's almost impossible if you think about physics to move that type of glass as fast as what something like the 55 could be. And there's a reason for that amount of glass that it's physically got to move. That's why the 85 1.8 will always be faster in focusing than the 85 1.4 GM. And that's something you just can't overcome. There is firmware updates that have improved it, but I'm telling you, it still won't focus as fast. The 85 GM will not focus as fast as the 85 1.8. There's no way it can. It's an impossibility. That's why the Canon 1.2 focus is so slow. It's due to moving that glass around. It's a physical impossibility, and that's why that happens. Jim said, has the latest firmware, which took care of motor noise, but is it your experience the 85 is slower? Yes, it definitely is. Definitely, Jim. I've tested that a lot, and it's definitely slower. Dan said, oh my God, why do people argue over this stuff? I know it cracks me up too, Dan, to be honest. What else have we got? Joseph said, Sony is killing the competition with their Sony A9, A7R III, and the A7 III. Canon and Nikon will need outstanding full-frame mirrorless cameras in order to compete. They are, and that's what we're still waiting to see. How will they compete? It's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. What have we got? I'm just scrolling through a few of these now because we've been on nearly an hour and 15, or it has been an hour and 15 minutes, so I'm going to scroll down a few. So sorry I've missed some of your comments, guys. I will leave them down below, and I always answer if I don't go through it all, but we'll be here for 3 hours if I go through all of these. John said the future for sensors is semi-autonomous and autonomous cars. Sony hopes to put $1,000 to $2,000 sensors in every car. That's probably true. The amazing thing about Sony is that it does have that sensor manufacturing, and that's one amazing thing about Sony, that they do make there's nothing can compete with their sensors, I believe. That's why Nikon still use them to develop them. What else? Dan, don't forget, Dan's making a comment saying that it's going over the same things. Dan, this discussion that we have today is about Sony news and rumors. It's not about the photo side of it. That's my other videos. This is just totally to go through video, through rumors, discussions about technology, and all that sort of stuff. So just be aware of that this isn't what my normal channel shows. This is just totally about a Sony news and rumors site. If you find that you just don't like the discussions in here, this live show may be not the best thing for you to watch, but that's definitely what this is about. So even though it seems to be going over the same things, it's what people are interested in for this discussion. What else have we got? Jeffrey said, hi everyone, congratulations to Sony. I agree, it is. They should be congratulated. But I do agree there, Dan, that people shouldn't just be jumping platforms every time something new comes out. And that's why I said I wouldn't jump over after this. It doesn't mean I wouldn't buy it, but there's no way known I'm going to jump over for the whole thing and get rid of all of my Sony lenses and gear just because Nikon produce a great camera. Sony still will produce great cameras after this. You really have to have a reason to switch. Simon said, I'll just do that too, that the Narcos shooter said, I'm all Fujifilm. They will be so dominant in 4 years, just saying. There's nothing wrong with Fuji. Fuji make great cameras. They really do make great cameras, but they haven't got anything full frame. That's why I never looked at Fuji when I shifted over. Simon said, I used to shoot on weddings on a Canon 10D, 6 megapixel. Exactly. Like I said, I used to shoot 12 megapixel and had no issues at all. Caleb said, will Sony be able to do medium format when Nikon decides to? Well, yes, they could, Caleb, but I don't think there's any need to. Medium format is completely overrated for the average shooter. And this is what you have to understand, Caleb. I used to shoot medium format when I used to shoot fashion. It's very slow and methodical. There's no way an average shooter would shoot medium format. They're not going to sell. So Sony really should not be concentrating on a medium format. They're far better off to concentrate on doing a global shutter than they are with doing medium format. An interesting scenario may be that they release a square format sensor, and I think this is the next stage. I really do believe that a square format is the next stage. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you never have to do this anymore. Can you imagine never having to do this? Every image you take will be correct because it's square, and then you do it later. And that's what I think will happen. I definitely believe that eventually the future probably will be a square sensor. I just got a donation. I better thank who that is. Oh, thank you so much, Jim. 6-pack of Modelo beer for you. I love it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nikon blow us all out of the water and have a square format sensor in that thing. Wouldn't that be interesting? I'm just going through these quicker, guys, because we've been here a long time. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit, see if there's anything that I think may be interesting to discuss. So let me scroll down. All right, someone's mentioned my name, so that's one good way of making me say what they've done. Just getting here late, and I agree with what you are suggesting. I got my Tamron, and it was my walk-around lens in Hawaii. Exactly, it's fantastic. Michael said, David, you're my number one guy. Thank you so much, Michael. Johnson said, shooting at 0.95 is like using a lens, baby, just a special effect. But the thing is, in some way, I don't agree with you, because in some ways, if you're shooting at 0.95 and you're back a little bit away, everything is still in focus, but you have that lovely depth of field. So don't discount it. That's why I love the Canon 1.2 so much. What LB? Jim said, agree, phone camera interface. I know, and I just don't know why no one's ever done that. I really can't understand why Sony haven't been the first to put like a phone camera interface. I mean, the touch sensor on those cameras is amazing. On phones, I mean. Why can't they give us that as well? Jeff said the phone startup time is too long. I'm sure they could get over that if they needed to, because they wouldn't have to have everything else in there, though, Jeff. Remember, it would only be the camera interface. I'm not talking about putting phone stuff in there, just for the camera. I'm just trying to see. Michael said, do you jump from ship to ship to ship if you want to? If you have the money and it makes you happy, do whatever's going to do that for you. And exactly, Michael, that's one thing you could say. If it makes you happy, it's your decision. And, do whatever you want to do to make you happy. Exactly. What else have we got? I think I'm going to have to block Jamie because he's annoying the crap out of me, and I think he's just a Nikon or Canon troll. Goodbye. Goodbye, Jamie. Miss you. I got rid of him. Jamie's gone. Jamie was a pain. So Michael said, Sony is leading, not following, or I'm trying to catch up like the other, or trying to catch up like other companies, and they're well ready for what's to come. And that's the thing, they are. Like Sony, we don't know what Sony are going to announce next. And I'm sure they're going to blow everything out of the water. We're just waiting on that. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in that respect. Langston said, good night, all. He's off. Thanks for joining us, Langston. I'm going to pop off in a minute too myself. Thank you so much for the donation, Jim. I really appreciate that. Paul said, David, do you know what's going on at Net SE? I bought the Maya Optic 50mm 0.95 for Sony E-mount on April and nothing been done. No, I don't, Paul. No, sorry. I don't know anything about that at all. Sorry. Creative Films, Jamie has no content to back up his bullshit. Well, he's gone now, Creative Films, anyway. Julian said bye-bye. We should all just wait bye-bye. I should have made everyone say bye, Jamie, as I did it. What else have we got? Phantom Rocker, I bought the 2470 GM. I'm happily stuck with Sony. Nothing wrong with that lens. Is an amazing lens, Phantom Rocker. It's amazing. It's beautiful. I mean, you've got the ultimate quality lens there. I don't blame you for sticking with it. David Johnson said Samyang used a phone. And that's exactly right. And that Samyang MX was an amazing camera. It's a pity that they went broke because, boy, would they have been pushing the boundaries now. And that's why I'm hoping eventually that it will happen. I just don't understand why it's taking so long for manufacturers to give us that phone touch interface on a camera. Imagine, it'd be fantastic. Casper said, use my superior GM lenses today. Casper always has a go at me about that. My 85 GM lens is super fast on my A9. What else have we got? Michael said, you clowned him. Jamie, bye-bye, love you. Love you. It was so nice to see you did that, David. You could have done it too, Michael. You're an administrator. Fathom Rocker said, yeah, I love that lens. All right, guys, I'm going to pop out. That's 1 hour, 24 minutes. Everyone's going to be saying I've been holding you on here too long again. Stay tuned for some other videos I'll be posting during the week. I'll probably will pop on live, particularly when the Nikon announcement's done. I'll have a discussion with you all about that. Apart from that, I'll have some other things during the week. So it's interesting. So let me know too. I haven't been able to answer everything. If I've missed something, sorry, but we were going to be here too long. That's why make sure you do put at David Oastler. Just make sure I see it easily. Put some comments down below because I will answer them as well. And obviously stay tuned for the next videos. Everyone have a great weekend, guys. I hope you get out there shooting. And apart from that, I'll see you all again soon, guys. So catch you later. Have a great one. Cheers, everyone.